This is going down with, honestly, one of my favorite low-key heavyweights, right? You got a Marcin Tybura who was there for me at plus 350 against Alexander Romanov, a guy that I have fond memories of. I also had him on a very long shot parlay, 3 underdogs. They all cashed the night that he beat Romanov, 14 to win 500 something. So I've had a very good experience with Alexander Romanov in the past, or excuse me, with Alexander Romanov, fading Alexander Romanov with Marcin Tybura in the past. But now I'm looking at a Sergey Spivak. They're running it back. This is actually a rematch. So it should be a fun night of fights overall. Is it high quality, the best thing you've ever seen? No. But are we here to break it down each and every week? Yes, we are. And I'm excited to do that. So without further ado, guys, let's take a look over at the Tapology card. And if you guys are new to First Look, welcome aboard. I appreciate you guys being here. What we do is we start by giving our initial impressions of the fight, right? I'm not fully done with my research. I'm going to tape all these fights in depth. I'm going to have a very well-formed opinion by the end of the week. But right now, it's a Monday night. We're coming at you a little bit earlier. And what I wanted to do is give you guys my first impressions of some of these lines, where my head is at initially. And then you guys will see, as the thought process develops throughout the week, as we do more research, some of the things that may or may not change over the course of the week. But also, I've submitted a bunch of information on Patreon already today. So I do have a bunch of research done in terms of the background on some of these fighters, how they've performed in their odds range before as, favorites and underdogs, things like that. So I'm excited to talk about some of those trends, as well as some of the, initial impressions I have, because I've watched all these guys fight before for the most part. So with that being said, guys, let's turn to this main event. And Marcin Tybura is somebody that we're all very familiar with now. If we're long-term UFC bettors, fans, watchers, whatever you want to call it, we've got a 12-7 fighter in this heavyweight division. An admirable record, but fairly journeyman-like in, quality. 38 years of age, so he's getting up there, even though it's a division that tends to have, a much more forgiving nature for older fighters. People can stick around a lot longer in the heavyweight division. They can have success into their 40s, especially in these upper weight classes. However, you look at a Marcin Tybura, he's on a 1-fight win streak, just defeated Tai Tuivasa without much issue in the first round, did take some damage in that fight, but once he got it to the ground, it was fairly elementary. Tai Tuivasa was just a fish out of water with a guy like Tybura on top of him. That being said, you saw the difference in terms of the quality and the speed in the Aspinall fight. He just had nothing to offer. Nobody's had anything to offer Tom Aspinall recently. So not to say that, it was a horrible look from him, but he just looked so slow and stuck in the mud. You could tell there was a massive level gap, between the two. Then you look at Blagoy Ivanov, it's a fairly good serviceable win, but Blagoy Ivanov is past his best days. He's not the most dangerous heavyweight fighter. I think that's kind of a tailor-made matchup in some ways for Marcin Tybura. Then the Alexander Romanov fight, he's a plus 350 underdog. Like I mentioned, he was a massive dog. And he got arguably 10-8'd in the first round, right? I thought that a draw would have been a fair and appropriate scorecard there. I was very happy to cash it, 29-28. I believe on all three judges' scorecards. I think that was a unanimous decision for Tybura. And then you look at the fight prior, he lost to Alexander Volkov. And what stood out about that fight, guys, Volkov was able to easily D up his takedowns. He was just holding double underhooks, pushing him off, skirting around the outside. And we just saw that Marcin Tybura, he can take care of a low level of heavyweight. Certainly, he could take guys to the ground. He can implement his top game. He can kind of use different skills to beat different people, right? Take some guys to the ground where they're weak. Other guys that try and overwhelm them with pressure, push them into the cage, just mitigate the exchanges at distance, because he's not the best striker you've seen in the heavyweight division. He's a guy that has been chin checked multiple times in this heavyweight division as well. If you look back at his early run in the UFC, Augusto Sakai, knockout in round 1. Shamil Abdurakhimov, knockout in round 2. Derek Lewis, knockout in round 3. Lost a unanimous decision to Fabricio Verdum as well over 5 rounds in a heavyweight main event. So he's not a guy that's known for being prolific with his hands or his strikes on the feet, but he's much more well known for being a guy who takes fights to the ground, dominates from on top, and can really win fights that way, using his wrestling or by outfighting with people, winning the points battle, just staying disciplined with his cardio. So ultimately, you look at, Tybura's record in the UFC over his last, huge fight sample size. He's done very well from the Sergey Spivak fight all the way back in February of 2020. He has since defeated Sergey Spivak via unanimous decision, Maxim Grishin, unanimous decision, Ben Rothwell, unanimous decision, Greg Hardy via TKO in round 2, Walt Harris via TKO in round 1, Alexander Volkov, he lost the unanimous decision there. Then he beats Romanov via majority decision, and he beats, who was it? Blagojevic via unanimous decision, loses to Aspinall, beats Tai Tuivasa. I mean, that's a very good run in his recent amount of fights. He's done very well over that sample size. However, the losses in his past do loom large. And you think about the fact that he's taking on a Sergey Spivak. Go back to the first time that they fought, and you had a, much closer to his athletic prime, 34-year-old Marcin Tybura, right? And he was taking on a Sergey Spivak who was just 25 years of age. So you're thinking, all right, Sergey Spivak's probably just hitting his physical development, right? He's just, probably finished growing into his body as a man. Think about this, guys. I noticed this right away when I was doing my research here. Sergey Spivak, the first time that he fights against Marcin Tybura, weighs in for the contest at 234 pounds. If you go back and look, Sergey Spivak's most recent weigh-in was for the Cyril Gane fight, and he showed up to that fight weighing 256 pounds. So he's clearly gotten much bigger, than the first time that these two gentlemen fought. And when you're looking at a rematch, you have to think to yourself, okay, well, what could have possibly changed? Number one, you got a Sergey Spivak who's gotten a little bit more comfortable inside the octagon, I would argue. He's a guy that's gone out there in some of these fights, and he's shown, process-based wrestling. He went out against Derek Lewis, and I tweeted out a clip of this earlier today, but he basically goes into an overhooking exchange, wraps an over-underhook clinch, goes to step behind Derek Lewis, off balances him moving forward, then cuts the angle, changes to a headlock, and just headlocks him easily to the mat. Got him standing upright and just out of position. It was real wrestling, and you could just see that Sergey Spivak has an idea of what he wants to do. But when you don't have the size, the physicality to implement it, it's going to be a real problem. Marcin Tybura is a talented wrestler and grappler in his own right, but he's a guy like all other heavyweights who prefers the top position, right? Unless your name is Fabricio Verdum and you could throw up a triangle, and an omoplata and all these things from the full guard. The vast majority of heavyweights, if they want to be effective ground players, they want to be on top. They want to take the back. They want to do some position, where they don't end up underneath another 260-pound man. And I do think that Sergey Spivak could change some of the wrestling dynamics coming into this fight. Now, I could just acknowledge to you guys off the rip, I haven't rewatched this contest. I want to go back and obviously rewatch the rematch as, the first basis for me to, make a bet in this fight, right? It's just to understand how this fight played out the first time, what could change. And I'm just going off of my memory. I remember Marcin Tybura just being much more veteran savvy. He was a guy that had a bunch of UFC fights under his belt. I had mentioned the losses that he had went through. Sergey Spivak, meanwhile, was just getting his feet wet inside of the big show. He was 10-1 as a pro at the time. Now he's doubled up his fight count. He's had 20 fights as a professional. He's 7-4 in the UFC. So he's actually starting to put together a pretty solid run. And you look at common opponents, obviously when Derek Lewis fought Sergey Spivak and Marcin Tybura, he was two different guys, but you saw that this guy was able to go out there and easily dominate Derek Lewis. I mean, I don't even know if he took a strike from Derek Lewis in that fight. Derek Lewis was dealing with some back problems. He's since tried to lose a lot of weight as a result, but you just saw him basically get ragdolled, slammed on his face, beat up, taken to the mat. Augusto Sakai, he treated him like he wasn't there. And again, that's another common opponent that has given Tybura problems in the past, if my memory serves. Greg Hardy, these guys, I also tweeted out earlier today a video of Sergey Spivak beating up Greg Hardy from the mount. And I just said, Marcin Tybura, Marcin Tybura, Sergey Spivak beating Greg Hardy into a pulp. That is what those guys like to do, right? They both went out there and bludgeoned him on the ground, just exposed the fact that he really did not have a ground game whatsoever to speak of. And, he also got cleaned up by Tom Aspinall, right? Tom Aspinall has one move that he does in the clinch. He hasn't done it recently because he's been knocking guys out with his hands and boxing very well. So, hey, hats off to him. Guy's sensational. But when you look at how he, was dealing with people early in the UFC, he would get into a clinch with them and he would throw this knee-elbow combination that was just so brutal. I think he put Sergey Spivak down with that combination, if my memory serves. He grabs a hold of the guy, pulls him in for the knee, and then hits the elbow over the side, and he just floored him with it. It was beautiful. So I think that you look back at Sergey Spivak, clearly the phase of the fight where he's uncomfortable is the striking phase. We saw that in the Walt Harris fight. He got knocked out in the first round. We saw that in the Tom Aspinall fight. He got knocked out in the first round. We saw that in the Cyril Gane fight. He got knocked out in the second round. That was his most recent contest. So clearly the striking range is the problem for him. Now, the outlier performance for him in terms of losses is Marcin Tybura. Marcin Tybura is one of those, well-rounded, jack of all trades, kind of a master of nothing, but, there to expose you. If you don't have something that you really can do well, Marcin Tybura is going to expose you. And I think that maybe at this point in his career, Sergey Spivak, who's had a lot more experience, who's been in a lot more UFC contests, who's gotten his feet wet, in the octagon many times against high-level guys, I don't think he's going to be afraid that Marcin Tybura is going to knock him out. He already went the distance with this guy before. So I think that what he's going to expect is if I can get on top of this guy, if I can reverse these wrestling positions, if I can make sure that I'm the one who's staying on top, I can win this fight. I'm, a young guy. I could still go out there and figure out, how to make the adjustments to win this contest. And you look at Sergey Spivak in terms of the intangibles here. He's on the right side of 30, 29 years of age, coming in against Marcin Tybura, who's 38 years of age, going on 39. He's already 9 months into his 38th birthday. So this guy's been, around the sport for quite a long time. He's had 33 professional fights, talk about 20 fights for Sergey Spivak. So not as many octagon miles, not as many cage miles overall for Sergey Spivak. He's getting a second crack at the same guy. And it does look like the betting market is pretty heavy on the Tybura side. 56% of Tapology voters going with Marcin Tybura early in the prediction cycle. But Sergey Spivak is entrenched here as a small favorite. I believe he's about a minus 135. Let's pull up the fight numbers screen, see if we can get the best available odds going for this contest. But you're essentially looking at a fight where the last time these two guys squared off, Marcin Tybura got the win, but odds makers are still looking to entrench, the favorite here as Sergey Spivak. So I did find that interesting as well. And maybe that's just a case of recency bias because, Sergey Spivak's been having big fights and in main events and things like that. But you look right now, the best available price on Marcin Tybura, Pinnacle Sportsbook, plus 135. You're seeing a minus 140, the best available price on BetOnline for Sergey Spivak. So fun fight, in the heavyweight division, an interesting rematch, but Bill Fay, did anyone else see Spivak crying during his walkout against Gane and a count dump on Gane? I did think that, that was a tough ask for Sergey Spivak, right? They sent him into the belly of the beast to get beat up there. But now this seems like a much more manageable task. Marcin Tybura, he has looked to me a little bit slower in some of his recent fights. The Tai Tuivasa fight, like I said, he did end up getting into the ground pretty easily and dominating there. But Tai Tuivasa has just been shown to have a real deficiency on the mat. And I think that Sergey Spivak exposed the same tendencies from him, right? And meanwhile, you're looking at the other fights for him. The Blagoy-Ivanov fight was a little close for comfort. The Alexander Romanov fight, he kind of got 10-8'd in round one and easily out-wrestled there. So it does call into question, if Marcin Tybura still has the same ability, because he needed Romanov to gas out in that fight to get back into it. And that's what I was relying on when I placed the bet. But I'm not sure that Sergey Spivak is so reliable to gas out. I just think he's reliable to wilt against big, heavy strikers, guys that are going to hurt him. And I just don't know that Marcin Tybura fits the bill for that. So for me, this is a spot where, I'm ever so slightly leaning towards the Sergey Spivak side. I'll have to look at some of the props on this fight, and I'll also have to do a lot more research in terms of tape study. But for me, the things that are intangible are the youth here for Sergey Spivak, the wrestling ability, and the fact that the odds makers are lining up with the guy who lost the first iteration of this fight. And that does seem interesting to me. It does seem like it's going to attract a lot of betting attention. I want to go back and look on Tapology real quick and just see the last time they were supposed to fight, guys. It was a preliminary bout back in Norfolk, Virginia, okay, for the Benavidez Figueiredo card. And the fight closed near Pick'em, and everybody was picking Sergey Spivak in that fight. 73% of people on Tapology were picking Sergey Spivak to beat Marcin Tybura. He lost the fight. Now, 54% of people are picking Marcin Tybura to win the rematch at 38 years of age. I find that interesting. And if you guys remember, I've talked about it before on Fight Numbers. The Fightnomics book. when they talk about over the age of 38, that's when fighters' losses by knockout tend to skyrocket in terms of the likelihood. So just something to keep in the back of our mind. Honestly, it's something I want to make sure I'm a little more diligent about in my own handicapping, is not letting some fundamentals about marketability and things like that cloud my judgment when it comes to these older fighters who are just a little bit past prime and maybe can't make the same run anymore. Shout out Tony Ferguson. We love him anyways. Shout out to Bill Fay as well for the $5 dono. I truly appreciate it, my brother. He says, Liam, I respect your grind and will work on becoming as disciplined as people like you. Take my money. You're a very kind person for that, Bill. I appreciate you. I'm just here doing my level best. I'm a normal ass guy. I do a pretty good job over the long term, but listen, brother, I've been on a tough run over the last couple weeks. So for me, it's all about staying disciplined, staying nose down to the grindstone, trying to find the next good bet, trying to do the next right thing and staying on task. And for me, I think that this is a great opportunity to get back on track this week. I look back at my own results and I've been doing a little bit better this year on some of the low-key Apex cards that people don't care about. And the pay-per-views, some of the bigger events have been a little bit of a struggle for me this year. So just working to keep evolving my game. I've had a lot of events. I've done well. I've done poorly. I've had great runs. I've had tough runs. So for me, it's just about staying level, riding the waves. Never let your highs get you too high. Never let your lows get you too low. But I appreciate you, Bill, and I appreciate the support. I appreciate each and every one of you guys that's rocking with us live and watching along.